up the 1985 Kennedy half dollar, and more specifically, what makes this coin so valuable today. So if you've been wondering how much your 1985 Kennedy half dollar might be worth, stick around. We're about to get into it. Alright, let's start with the basics. The 1985 Kennedy half dollar is part of the regular series of half dollars issued by the U.S. Mint, which were first introduced in 1964 after the tragic assassination of President John F. Kennedy. As a reminder, the coin features the iconic profile of President Kennedy on the obverse, and the reverse showcases the traditional eagle design, a hallmark of U.S. coins. Now, in terms of mintage, the 1985 Kennedy half dollar isn't particularly rare, as it was produced in substantial numbers by both the Philadelphia and Denver mints. The mintage for 1985 was approximately 39 million coins combined. So, unlike some rare coins, the 1985 Kennedy half dollar wasn't produced in extremely limited quantities. But there are still factors that can affect its value, which we'll get into shortly. So, what actually influences the value of a 1985 Kennedy half dollar? Well, just like with any coin, there are several factors that determine its worth: its condition, its rarity, and its demand in the marketplace. First up, the condition. Coins are graded based on their physical appearance, which is a huge factor in determining value. A coin's condition ranges from good to mint state. The better the condition, the higher the value. The 1985 Kennedy half dollar, when found in pristine or uncirculated condition, can be worth significantly more than a coin that's been heavily circulated. Now, let's get to the numbers. As of today, in 2025, the value of a 1985 Kennedy half dollar in circulated condition, meaning it shows some signs of wear, but is still in decent shape, typically falls between $1.50 to $2. However, if the coin is in mint state or uncirculated condition, it can fetch anywhere between $6 to $10, depending on the specific grade. For example, a coin with a high grade, like MS65 or better, could be at the higher end of that range or even exceed it slightly. Now, let's talk about special varieties and unique circumstances that can make a 1985 Kennedy half dollar even more valuable. While there aren't any significant error coins for this year, sometimes small minting anomalies can increase a coin's appeal. For example, if a 1985 Kennedy half dollar has a noticeable die crack or an off-center strike, that might catch the eye of a collector looking for something unique. Additionally, if you come across a 1985 Kennedy half dollar that was included in an uncirculated set or proof set issued by the U.S. Mint, the value could also be higher. Proof sets are made with a special process that gives the coin a mirror-like finish, making them highly desirable to collectors. If you're considering investing in Kennedy half dollars, particularly the 1985 variety, it's important to keep in mind that while these coins are somewhat valuable, they don't have the astronomical value of some rarer coins. However, if you can get your hands on uncirculated versions or special error coins, they could be a great addition to your collection. Many collectors enjoy the Kennedy half dollar series for its connection to U.S. history, and over time, certain years and varieties could increase in value. The 1985 Kennedy half dollar might not be a major investment opportunity yet, but as with all coins, the market can shift, and you never know when a specific coin could catch the interest of collectors. So, to sum it up, the 1985 Kennedy half dollar isn't the most valuable coin on the market, but it can still be worth a decent amount, especially if it's in mint or uncirculated condition. And if you're a coin collector, it's a nice piece to have in your collection, considering its historical significance. Remember, always pay attention to the condition, mintage, and any potential rare features when evaluating a coin's value. And as always, if you're looking to buy or sell coins, make sure to consult a professional numismatist to get the most accurate price for your pieces. First up, the 1989 Kennedy half dollar with the P mint mark. You'll be surprised to learn how even a coin in fine condition can hold value in today's market. So, let's get started. First, let's talk about the Kennedy half dollar itself. These coins were first introduced in 1964 to honor President John F. Kennedy after his tragic assassination in 1963. They were minted in silver during their early years, but by 1971, silver was replaced with a copper-nickel composition for circulation coins. However, some collectors and enthusiasts still wonder about the value of later years like the 1989 version, especially with the P mint mark, which signifies it was minted in Philadelphia now. When we talk about a coin being in fine condition, it's important to understand what that means. A coin graded as fine shows moderate wear, with the major details still visible, though some finer details may be worn out. It's not pristine, but it's far from being a heavily worn or damaged coin. In 1989, Kennedy half dollars were made from a copper-nickel-clad composition, which means they don't have intrinsic silver value. However, their collectible value comes from demand, rarity, and condition. For a coin in fine condition, the value largely depends on what collectors are willing to pay. As of today, a 1989 Kennedy half dollar with a P mint mark in fine condition is typically valued at around $600 in the current market. That's close to its face value, unless you find a buyer who appreciates its historical significance or is completing a collection. However, higher grades, like MS65 or proof versions, can fetch significantly more. Here's a quick tip. If you have a 1989 Kennedy half dollar, always check for errors or varieties. Errors, such as double dies or off-center strikes, can make your coin much more valuable. Even common coins can surprise you if they have unique characteristics. So, while the 1989 Kennedy half dollar with a P mint mark in fine condition isn't breaking any bank, it's still a fascinating piece of American history and a great way to introduce yourself to coin collecting. Plus, who knows? You might come across a rare error that skyrockets its value. Next up, the 1972 Kennedy half dollar. If you're a collector, or just someone who's inherited a coin or two and wondered about their value, you're in the right place. In this video, we'll explore how much a 1972 Kennedy half dollar in fine condition is worth in today's market. Whether you have one of these coins lying around or you're considering purchasing one, you'll want to know what it's worth in 2025. So, grab your magnifying glass and let's jump in first. Let's quickly go over some key details about the 1972 Kennedy half dollar. This coin, as many of you may know, was minted to honor the memory of President John F. Kennedy following his tragic assassination in 1963. The Kennedy half dollar was first issued in 1964 and continues to be produced in various forms today. But when it comes to 1972, what makes it particularly interesting? Well, the 1972 coin has some notable features that affect its value. The half dollar was minted in both copper nickel-clad and 40% silver versions. However, if you're holding one of these coins and wondering about its value, it's important to know whether it's the silver version or the clad version, as this plays a major role in its market value. In 1972, the United States Mint produced a variety of Kennedy half dollars. The most valuable in terms of silver content are the 40% silver coins. These were minted from 1965 to 1970, after which the U.S. government switched to the copper nickel-clad version starting in 1971. Now, the 1972 Kennedy half dollar is one of the copper nickel-clad coins. This means that it contains no silver, unlike the 40% silver coins from the previous years. So, if you're looking at a 1972 Kennedy half dollar, you're most likely dealing with the clad version unless it's a special proof or commemorative coin. Let's talk numbers. When it comes to coin grading, fine is a condition that means the coin shows wear, but still retains most of its design. In the case of a 1972 Kennedy half dollar in fine condition, it's likely to show some signs of wear on Kennedy's portrait and the eagle on the reverse, but the coin will still have discernible details. Now, let's get into the value. Since the 1972 Kennedy half dollar is a copper nickel-clad coin, it doesn't have significant intrinsic value due to its metal content. However, its worth can still be influenced by several factors, including its rarity, condition, and demand from collectors. As of 2025, a 1972 Kennedy half dollar in fine condition is typically valued around $2 to $4 in most markets. This price might fluctuate slightly based on specific coin dealer prices, but it's safe to say that it's not worth a fortune on its own unless it has some other distinguishing characteristics. As we've mentioned, a fine condition coin typically has visible wear, but maintains some sharp details. Coins graded in better condition, such as extremely fine or uncirculated, can fetch higher prices, sometimes reaching $10 or more. Special markings or errors. Certain error coins, such as those with misprints or unusual features, can sometimes be worth more than a standard coin. For instance, a doubled die or a minting error could significantly increase a coin's value. Rarity. While the 1972 Kennedy half-dollar wasn't produced in small numbers, there are certain mintage variations that might impact value. For example, the 1972 Denver Mint coins might be slightly rarer compared to those minted in Philadelphia. Demand from collectors. The value of a coin can fluctuate based on demand. For example, if a particular series of Kennedy half-dollars becomes more popular among collectors, the prices could rise accordingly. Silver price fluctuations. Even though the 1972 Kennedy half-dollar doesn't contain silver, fluctuations in the price of silver can impact the overall market for coins like the Kennedy half-dollar, particularly if you have a mix of silver and clad versions in your collection. Look for errors. Check if your coin has any distinguishing marks or minting errors. This could include things like doubling in the date or lettering, or any unusual indentations. Websites like the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, NGC, or Professional Coin Grading Service, PCGS, have tools to help you determine the approximate value based on your coin's grade and condition. If you have a collection and you want an accurate appraisal, you might want to visit a local coin shop or attend a coin show. They can give you the most up-to-date market value based on your coin's condition. Before we wrap up, it's worth mentioning that there are different versions of the 1972 Kennedy half-dollar. For example, the 1972 proof half-dollar, which was made for collectors and has a mirror-like finish, can be worth significantly more than the standard circulation version. In fact, a 1972 proof half-dollar can be valued around $5 to $10 in fine condition, with uncirculated or perfect specimens going for even higher.
Next up, the 1776 with 1976 Independence Hall Bicentennial half-dollar. Specifically, we'll be focusing on the versions without a mint mark and in good condition. In 1976, the United States celebrated its 200th anniversary, and the U.S. Mint released a special commemorative set of coins to mark this important milestone. One of the most iconic coins from this set is the 1776 to 1976 Kennedy half-dollar, which features President John F. Kennedy on the obverse and Independence Hall on the reverse. This was part of the bicentennial coinage program, where the U.S. Mint replaced the usual reverse designs on quarters, half-dollars, and dollar coins with special designs commemorating the birth of the nation. The half-dollar specifically honored Independence Hall in Philadelphia, the site where both the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution were debated and signed. Now, what makes this particular coin stand out? For most bicentennial half-dollars, the mint mark, whether it's P for Philadelphia, D for Denver, or S for San Francisco, can be found just above the date. However, some of these coins were struck without a mint mark, indicating they were produced at the Philadelphia Mint. What's interesting is that while the lack of a mint mark alone doesn't make the coin rare, certain factors like the condition and market demand can drive up the value significantly. We're talking specifically about coins in good condition or better. But remember, the higher the grade, the more valuable the coin becomes. When it comes to coin collecting, condition is everything. Coin grading is done on a scale from 1 to 70, with 1 being a coin that is barely recognizable, and 70 being a flawless specimen, straight from the mint. A good grade typically means the coin shows heavy wear, but the major design elements are still visible. For the 1776-1976 half-dollar, a coin without a mint mark in good condition may not fetch top dollar, but it's still sought after by collectors due to its historical significance. We'll dive into specific values in just a moment. So, what's the market value of this commemorative half-dollar without a mint mark today? As of insert current year, the value of a 1776-1970s half-dollar in good condition without a mint mark hovers between $1.50 to $3.50, which is mainly due to its silver content and historical appeal. While the coin was minted in high quantities, its numismatic value remains modest unless it's in a higher grade. If you have one of these coins in fine or very fine condition, the value can increase to around $5 to $10. For coins that have been graded mint state, the price can go up to $30 or more, depending on the specific grading and the buyer's interest. Even though the 1776 to 1976 bicentennial half-dollar isn't considered exceedingly rare, it holds immense sentimental value for many collectors. The coin represents a pivotal moment in American history and has a design that appeals to both history buffs and coin collectors.
Next up, the 1974 Kennedy half-dollar, specifically one in very fine condition. We'll explore its history, features, and most importantly, its current value in today's market. So, grab your magnifying glass and let's get into it. First things first, let's talk about the 1974 Kennedy half-dollar itself. It's been a staple of U.S. coinage since its introduction in 1964. But the 1974 version holds some interesting quirks that collectors find particularly appealing. The 1974 Kennedy half-dollar was struck during a period when the U.S. Treasury was transitioning away from using silver in regular circulation coins. By 1971, the U.S. Mint stopped using 90% silver in circulating coins and moved to a composition of 40% silver for the half-dollar. This meant that Kennedy half-dollars from 1965 to 1970 contained 40% silver, and the 1974 version is one of those coins. Now, the design of the coin was created by famed artist Gilroy Roberts. On the obverse, you have the iconic portrait of John F. Kennedy, while the reverse features the heraldic eagle. The 1974 coin was minted in both Philadelphia, no mint mark, and Denver, with the D mint mark, which brings us to our next point, rarity. The 1974 Kennedy half-dollar wasn't exactly rare in terms of mintage. In fact, a significant number of these coins were produced. Let's take a quick look at the mintage numbers. Philadelphia Mint 124,104,000 coins. As you can see, there were millions of these coins minted, so on the surface they aren't particularly rare. However, what makes them interesting to collectors today is their condition, especially those found in higher grades like very fine. Now, let's talk about coin grading. When we say a 1974 Kennedy half-dollar is in very fine condition, we mean that it shows moderate wear but still has visible details. The design elements, such as the Kennedy portrait and the eagle, are still sharp, but there may be some light wear on the high points, like Kennedy's hair and the eagle's wings. It's a coin that has been in circulation, but it's not overly worn out. The key to determining a coin's value lies in its grade. The higher the grade, the more valuable the coin. Coins in lower grades, like good or fine, typically don't fetch as much money. So, a 1974 Kennedy half-dollar in very fine condition is already a step up from the average circulated coin. Alright, now for the burning question. What is the value of a 1974 Kennedy half-dollar in very fine condition in today's market? Well, here's the deal. While these coins are not considered rare or especially scarce, their value can fluctuate depending on the current market and silver prices. As of now, the 1974 Kennedy half-dollar in very fine condition typically ranges in value between $200 and $500, depending on the exact quality of the coin and whether it has been professionally graded. For example, if you find one with an exceptionally clean strike and minimal wear, it could fetch closer to that $5 mark. But wait, there's another factor to consider: silver. Since the 1974 Kennedy half-dollar contains 40% silver, its value is partly influenced by the current market price of silver. If silver prices are up, the coin's intrinsic silver value will be worth more, adding a premium to its base value. For instance, if silver prices are around $250 per ounce, the silver content in a 1974 Kennedy half-dollar could be worth around $200 to $300 just for the metal itself, which could push the coin's total value up slightly. However, the numismatic value, driven by its condition and rarity, still plays a major role. Mint mark. While mint mark doesn't significantly impact the value of these coins, it can still be an interesting feature for collectors. Silver content. Remember, a 40% silver coin will always have some intrinsic value based on the silver market, so keep an eye on that too. So, there you have it. The 1974 Kennedy half-dollar in very fine condition might not make you rich overnight, but it certainly has a place in the hearts of collectors. Whether you're holding onto one for its historical value, its silver content, or just for the fun of coin collecting, it's always good to keep an eye on the condition and the market trends.
Next up, the 1973 Kennedy half dollar without a mint mark, graded in extra fine condition. Let's start with a bit of history. The Kennedy half dollar was first introduced in 1964, following the tragic assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Initially minted in 90% silver, the Kennedy half dollar was a way to honor JFK's legacy while also providing the U.S. government with a valuable circulating coin. The 1973 version, however, was part of the series minted in copper-nickel clad, which replaced the silver content starting in 1971 for regular circulation coins. Now, the 1973 Kennedy half dollar that we're talking about today doesn't carry a mint mark, meaning it was minted in Philadelphia. While it's not made of silver, it holds unique value among collectors, especially in extra fine condition. So what does it mean when we say a coin is in extra fine condition? Well, an XF coin has visible wear on the surface, but the key design elements are still very crisp and sharp. For a Kennedy half dollar, you'll be able to clearly see President Kennedy's profile, the details of his hair, and the features on the reverse eagle. The coin may show some light wear on the highest points, but it should still have a lot of fine detail remaining. Extra fine coins are highly sought after because they strike a perfect balance between affordability and the quality of the coin's appearance, making them ideal for collectors who want a beautiful, high-quality coin without breaking the bank. Now, let's get into the heart of the matter: the value of the 1973 Kennedy half dollar in extra fine condition. While this coin is not made of silver, its historical significance, combined with its condition, gives it a value that collectors are willing to pay for. As of today, the value of a 1973 Kennedy half dollar without a mint mark in extra fine condition typically falls in the range of $300 to $600. This might not seem like a huge sum, but keep in mind that prices can fluctuate depending on market demand, as well as any special factors like a particular coin's rarity or demand in certain auctions. What makes this coin interesting is its scarcity in higher grades. Even though the coin is not rare in terms of mintage, finding one in extra fine condition is what collectors often seek, especially since many were circulated and show more wear. Uncirculated or proof coins, coins that are not part of regular circulation, but were specially minted in proof sets or mint sets, can command a higher price. These coins are often in pristine condition. So, while the 1973 Kennedy half dollar without a mint mark in extra fine condition might not be one of the highest value coins on the market, it still holds significant value for collectors. Whether you're a seasoned collector or just starting out, it's a coin that deserves attention, especially if it's in good condition. And remember, with the right market conditions or a rare error, you could find a real gem.
Next up, the 1988 Kennedy half dollar coin in extra fine condition, and explore just how much it's worth in today's market. Now, you might be wondering, what makes the 1988 Kennedy half dollar so valuable? After all, it was produced more than 3 decades ago, and it's not exactly what you would call rare. But hold on a second, because there's more to this coin than meets the eye. Let's start with a little background information. The Kennedy half dollar was first introduced in 1964, just after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The series was a tribute to the late president, and it's been minted in various designs ever since. But today, we're specifically focusing on the 1988 version. Now, before we dive into the details about its value, let's quickly touch on the condition of the coin. A coin's grade is critical when determining its value, and in today's market, collectors place a lot of importance on that. Coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 being perfect. Extra fine, or XF, falls somewhere in the range of 40 to 45 on this scale. This means the coin shows some wear, but the design is still very clear. There may be some slight details worn off, especially in areas like the hair and the folds of the clothing, but overall, the coin is still in great condition. Okay, so now you might be asking, what's the current value of a 1988 Kennedy half dollar in extra fine condition? Well, as of today, the value is likely to be a bit more than its face value of 50 cents, but not necessarily a fortune. In general, Kennedy half dollars minted in the 1980s, including the 1988 edition, were produced in large quantities. The U.S. Mint struck over 25 million of these coins in that year, which means they aren't exactly rare or in high demand by collectors. However, there are still factors that can affect the price. In extra fine condition, you can expect a 1988 Kennedy half dollar to be valued at around $500 to $800. That's right, while it's certainly worth more than face value, it's not one of those coins that will make you a millionaire. But don't worry, there are some rare exceptions we'll talk about later. The value of Kennedy half dollars can vary based on the overall market for silver, as well as the demand for coins in a particular condition. If the price of silver increases, this could drive up the value of certain Kennedy half dollars. For instance, if you happen to find a 1988 Kennedy half dollar with significant silver content, that could add to its value. But before you go running to check your change for this coin, keep in mind that most of the 1988 Kennedy half dollars are made of copper nickel, not silver. In fact, the 1988 version has only a small amount of silver content, just 40% silver, making it less valuable than earlier years like the 1964 coin, which is 90% silver. Now let's talk about those exceptions I mentioned earlier. While most 1988 Kennedy half dollars won't get you rich, there are some rare circumstances where you could find a highly valuable coin. For example, if you find a coin with a minting error, like a double die or a misstrike, that could significantly increase its value. Some Kennedy half dollars from other years have sold for hundreds or even thousands of dollars at auctions. But in the case of the 1988 coin, unless you have one with a minting error or an extremely high-grade specimen, you're not going to see prices in the hundreds. So to summarize, the 1988 Kennedy half dollar in extra fine condition will likely be worth between $200 and $500. It's not a coin that will make you rich, but it's still a neat piece of history for your collection.
Next up, the 1974 Kennedy half dollar, exploring its history, design, and what makes some of these coins particularly valuable in today's market. In 1974, the United States Mint produced over 200 million Kennedy half dollars at the Philadelphia facility and approximately 79 million at the Denver Mint. These coins were part of a series honoring President John F. Kennedy, introduced shortly after his assassination in 1963. The obverse features a left-facing portrait of President Kennedy, designed by Gilroy Roberts, while the reverse showcases the presidential seal, crafted by Frank Gasparo. Composed of a copper-nickel clad, these coins lack the silver content found in earlier half dollars. For collectors, the value of a 1974 Kennedy half dollar largely depends on its condition and mint mark. Coins are graded on a scale from poor to perfect uncirculated. An extra fine grade indicates light wear on the highest points of the design, with all details still sharp and clear. It's important to note that while circulated coins typically hold a value close to their face value, those in uncirculated or near-perfect condition can command significantly higher prices. For instance, a 1974 Kennedy half dollar graded MS-68, a near-flawless coin, has been known to sell for as much as $8,000. The market for these coins can be dynamic. Auction results have shown that collectors are willing to pay a premium for top-grade specimens. However, such high-grade coins are exceptionally scarce. For collectors aiming to invest in 1974 Kennedy half dollars, focusing on coins graded MS-66 or higher is advisable. These grades are where the value starts to increase notably due to their scarcity. Mint marks also play a role in a coin's value. The 1974 Kennedy half dollars were minted in Philadelphia, no mint mark, and Denver, D mint mark. While both are common, coins from the Denver Mint in higher grades can be slightly more valuable. Whether you're a seasoned collector or a curious enthusiast, understanding the nuances of coin grading and market demand is crucial. The 1974 Kennedy half dollar serves as a testament to how condition and rarity can significantly influence a coin's value.
Next up, the 1968 Kennedy half dollar, focusing on its value in fine condition in today's market. If you have one of these sitting in your collection, or even in your coin jar, this video might surprise you with what it's worth. 1968 is a year that holds significant importance for numismatists. The 1968 Kennedy half dollar, while not necessarily the rarest coin in the series, has been gaining some attention lately due to its unique historical context and its role in the era of coinage transition in the United States. Now, when we talk about the value of coins like the 1968 Kennedy half dollar, we have to consider a few important factors. These include the coin's condition, its mint mark, and the silver content. Let's break it all down for you so you can understand exactly what you might be holding in your hand. First things first, let's talk about the condition of the coin. Coin condition, or grade, is absolutely crucial when determining its market value. The 1968 Kennedy half dollar, just like any other coin, can be found in a variety of grades, from well-worn to practically uncirculated. The fine grade represents a coin that has noticeable wear, but still retains most of its features and details. For example, a coin in fine condition will show wear on the high points, such as the head and the folds of the Kennedy bust, and the reverse design, including the eagle. However, the main details, such as the date, the legend, and the mint mark, will still be visible. Now, before we dive into value, we need to look at the composition of this coin. The 1968 Kennedy half dollar is a clad coin, meaning it doesn't contain a full silver composition like earlier versions. It has a copper core and a thin layer of silver on the surface, which makes it different from the 90% silver Kennedy half dollars produced before 1965. Though the 1968 Kennedy half dollar is not as heavily composed of silver as the earlier versions, it still contains about 40% silver. This makes it interesting for collectors, especially since silver prices have fluctuated significantly over the years. So, how much is this 1968 Kennedy half dollar worth in fine condition? As of today, in the year 2025, prices for these coins can vary depending on where you sell or buy them, but I'll give you a solid estimate based on current market trends. In fine condition, the 1968 Kennedy half dollar typically sells for somewhere between $300 to $600 USD. This value is primarily driven by the silver content and its appeal to collectors. However, if you're lucky enough to find one with an uncirculated grade or in proof condition, its value could go significantly higher, especially if it's from a specific mint silver content. While it's only 40% silver, silver prices will continue to impact the melt value, which is always a factor in determining the worth of any silver coin. Now that you know the ins and outs of the 1968 Kennedy half dollar, you might be thinking about checking your coin jar or digging through your collection. But before you rush to sell or buy one, make sure to consult with a professional numismatist or check the most recent market prices. Coins like these can be affected by trends and demand. Online auction sites, local coin shops, and even coin conventions are great places to get an up-to-date sense of the coin's value. If you're really into coin collecting, joining a community or following price guides is a great way to stay informed.
Next up, the 1980 Kennedy half dollar with the D mint mark, especially those in fine condition. We'll explore its history, design intricacies, and current market value. So if you've ever wondered about the worth of that half dollar tucked away in your drawer, the Kennedy half dollar was first introduced in 1964 to honor the late President John F. Kennedy. Over the years, it has become a favorite among collectors. The 1980 edition, particularly those minted in Denver, denoted by the D mint mark, holds a special place due to its unique characteristics and the era it represents. Obverse front features a left-facing portrait of President Kennedy, designed by Gilroy Roberts. Reverse back showcases the presidential seal, an eagle holding an olive branch and arrows, symbolizing peace and strength, designed by Frank Gasparo. Composition, primarily a copper core with a nickel-clad exterior. Diameter, 30.61 millimeters. Weight, 11.34 grams. In 1980, the Denver Mint produced approximately 456,049 Kennedy half dollars. This substantial mintage means that while the coin isn't rare, certain conditions and errors can increase its value. Coin grading assesses a coin's wear and overall condition. The fine, F12 grade indicates moderate wear. Major details are visible but show significant smoothing. For the 1980 D Kennedy half dollar, this means obverse, hair details are worn but visible. Facial features are clear. Reverse. Feathers on the eagle are worn, especially on the wings and legs, but the overall design remains discernible. As of March 2025, the value of a 1980D Kennedy half-dollar in fine condition is approximately its face value, around $500. This is due to the high mintage and the coin's composition, which lacks precious metals like silver. However, uncirculated coins or those with unique errors can fetch higher prices. The 1980D Kennedy half-dollar is a fascinating piece of numismatic history. While those in fine condition may not hold significant monetary value, they offer a glimpse into the past and the art of coinage. Always inspect your coins carefully, as unique errors or higher-grade specimens can be valuable.
Next up, the 1967 Kennedy half-dollar. And more specifically, we're going to take a closer look at its value in today's market. So, what makes this coin so valuable? And how much could you sell a 1967 Kennedy half-dollar in good condition for right now? All right, let's start with a bit of history. The Kennedy half-dollar was first introduced in 1964, shortly after President John F. Kennedy's tragic assassination. The government wanted to create a coin to honor his legacy. So they replaced the Franklin half-dollar with the Kennedy design, which features President Kennedy on the obverse and the U.S. presidential seal on the reverse. Pretty iconic, right? Now, 1967 was an interesting year. By this time, the U.S. government had already started the transition away from using silver in many of its coins, including the Kennedy half-dollar. So, while the 1964 issue was made from 90% silver, the 1967 coin, like other coins from 1965 to 1970, was composed of 40% silver. This change was primarily due to rising silver prices and the cost of production. Now, before we jump into the value of the 1967 Kennedy half-dollar, it's important to understand the grading system. When it comes to coin values, the condition of the coin plays a huge role in determining how much it's worth. Coins are graded on a scale from good to mint state. Let's talk numbers. In 1967, the Kennedy half-dollar had a face value of 50 cents. But, of course, we're not interested in face value when it comes to collectors. We're looking at how much these coins are worth today based on their silver content, rarity, and condition. For a 1967 Kennedy half-dollar in good condition, you can expect it to be worth around $3 to $4. Why so low? Well, these coins aren't rare, millions were minted, and they're made of 40% silver, which doesn't give them the same value as coins made of higher purity silver. However, the price is still higher than face value because of the silver content. Now, if your coin is in very fine or extremely fine condition, it can fetch between $5 and $7. These coins still show some wear, but retain most of their details, which makes them more desirable to collectors. And finally, if you've got a 1967 Kennedy half-dollar in uncirculated or mint state condition, it could be worth anywhere between $8 to $15 or more. This is where the quality of the coin really matters. The more pristine the coin, the higher the value. Remember, silver prices play a big role in determining a coin's value. The 1967 Kennedy half-dollar contains 0.1479 ounces of silver. So, if silver prices rise, the value of these coins will also increase, regardless of their condition. For example, if silver hits $30 per ounce, the silver in the coin alone is worth around $4.44. Right now, silver is hovering around $24 per ounce, which brings the silver content of a 1967 Kennedy half-dollar to roughly $3.55. But, like we mentioned earlier, the condition of the coin plays a major role. If your coin is in top shape, it'll sell for much more than just its silver value. So, why is the 1967 Kennedy half-dollar still in demand? Well, despite being a common coin in terms of production numbers, the 1967 coin holds historical significance. It's part of the transition period of U.S. coinage when silver was gradually phased out, and collectors are always on the lookout for well-preserved examples. Plus, there's just something about the design that's become iconic. President Kennedy's image, the symbolism of the U.S. presidency, and the 40% silver content make this coin desirable. So you've got a 1967 Kennedy half-dollar in your collection, and you're thinking about selling it. Where do you start? Well, there are several places to sell your coins, including online platforms like eBay, local coin shops, or even coin shows. But always remember to do your research on the current market trends before selling to ensure you get the best price. To wrap it up, the 1967 Kennedy half dollar is a great coin to add to any collection, especially if you're into silver coins or U.S. history. While they may not be worth a fortune in typical condition, their value is still significantly higher than their face value. And if you happen to have a pristine coin, you could be looking at a nice little payday. Let me know in the comments if you have any 1967 Kennedy half dollars in your collection and what condition they're in. And as always, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more coin-related content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.